not just for the growth of U.S. soccer, but I think for the growth of sports in general. And I think if you look at the media landscape right now, um, the classic legacy, I don't know, sports broadcaster or just legacy media person is kind of losing significance in our culture. And more, the people that are looked to as the experts are the fans.
All right, and we are back again, episode 36 of the Box to Box podcast. If you don't know who I am, my name is Jose Tejas. I am the primary host of the show. I am typically joined by my co-host, Andre and Alina. They're not here today. They're doing a million things. It's that time of the year for them. So I am here to hold the fort down. But I am not alone as normal on this show. I am joined by a very special guest, a creator in the broader soccer community. I will tee him up with a great introduction here in just a second. But before we get there, as always, guys, if you can, please like the video, subscribe to the channel. The support does really go a long way. And as always, Box to Box is presented by GOLZtv. GOLZtv, where you can find all of your free, unlimited footy content today. Now, with that said, I got one of the OGs of the American soccer content space on our show today. I'm super stoked that he's here. No pun intended. And I really can't hype up the Yank Report enough. This guy's been creating soccer content for as long as I've really kind of been following on YouTube and digesting a ton of soccer content along the way. His name is Sam Stokes, and I'm so glad that he's here. Sam, how are you, man? I know this has kind of been, I feel personally like a little while coming now. How's your day going?
It's going pretty good, man. I knocked out an interview before this, and now we got this right here. So just keeping it rolling.
I love it, man. On the other side of the mic today, I love it, man. Well, look, I think our audience is going to be one. I imagine a few of them probably already heard of you. We have quite a few adamant U.S. soccer fans that follow guys like Tactical Manager, follow the Straight Red Card, the Yank Report. I imagine we already have some folks that have heard of you, but I want to make sure for those who have not, they get a really good understanding of what your channel offers, who you are, and today, like we always do on this show, we're going to talk about your journey as a content creator and really why you felt the need to kind of start creating this content around the U.S. men's national team and where you see the growth of U.S. soccer going long term. But we'll get there. We start this show the way that we always start it. It's somewhat of a deeper question, but I think it's a good one. Sam, who are you today?
Oh man, today, gosh, trying to a person trying to reflect on the last few years, I guess, like since the post-COVID era, and think about sort of what I do and what I like to do, and try to maximize and optimize those things. I feel like coming out of COVID, there was a lot of new adventures and things happening that I've been pursuing, and I just want to kind of reflect on those things, think about the things that I really want to do, and put a lot of energy into doing those the best way that I possibly can. I think that's where I'm at right now.
I love that, man. That's a great answer. And I think it summarizes probably more than a few of us, the post COVID, right? Trying to figure out, who we are, what we want to be doing. Because the world's changed so much since then. So, yeah, man, that's a great response. I think it summarizes you on a deeper level than just the content creator that most of us know you to be today. So, I love that. Now, I think with how I want to kind of start this interview, past that question would be maybe from the beginning, man. I think the great way to kind of kick things off, get to know you a little bit, is talking about you before this long journey you've been on with your channel. So we'll talk about the Yank Report here in a few minutes, but for now, I mean, kind of walk me through who you are, maybe as a soccer fan or just a person in general. Let's start from the beginning, right? Prior to launching the Yank Report channel, how were you consuming soccer content? Where were you as a fan?
Yeah, I think the consumption of soccer content kind of has evolved as the internet's evolved. I think soccer is one of those sports that's really, at least American soccer, is really tied to the internet because you're just not getting a lot of that content from mainstream media. At least you weren't for a long period of time there. So if you wanted to track the Yanks abroad, if you wanted to follow even European soccer, whatever else, like you had to go to the internet to find those things.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the early days of soccer content for me and following the national team, I think the generation of players that like really inspired me to really start following the team and on a much deeper level was like Michael Bradley, Josie Altidore, Freddie Adu. I really think about that Confederations Cup run. That I think that was the thing that really I had been following the team before that, but really sucked me in. Those players were around my age and felt like they represented a new generation and new possibilities for American soccer moving forward. I really felt like that was going to be the generation that brought us to the promised land. It didn't really work out that way, but those were the players that I got really excited about. I remember I created a Twitter account because I wanted to follow Josie Altidore on Twitter. And these were like the early days of Twitter when nobody had Twitter. I remember going to Soccer by Ives. That was the place where I'd really track Yanks abroad. I would go into Big Soccer every now and then and follow players there. And that was sort of my consumption, man. I mean, there was a few soccer websites out there which were giving detailed breakdowns of what these players were doing, where they were going, things like that. Eventually, as we kept moving forward, Reddit emerged as a big landing spot for soccer fans and just a much bigger community. And I think a community that it was a forum that gave you the opportunity to see video and pictures and stuff like that as well, and people to share articles. So it was a little bit more accessible. So I was big on the U.S. soccer subreddit, following that every day. I mean, it is still, if you look at my computer, it's still one of the hot links on my computer up there with the Yanks Abroad page on Big Soccer is still up there. I haven't edited any of these things. They're still up there.
I love that.
Checking these things on an hourly basis. So that allowed us to get even more and follow these players and talk to people who were into these players and really for the first time just really see these massive differences of opinions on certain players and get into these debates and hypotheticals about best 11s and where this player projects and where this player projects. So that's kind of been the journey up to starting the Yank Report, I think.
Nice, man. And look, and you mentioned them there that really caught my attention. The Confederations Cup run, which was for anybody who and I think it was back in what, 2009? Yeah, right, when we beat Spain 2-0, and then I thought we were going to go on to win it at that point, right? And then I believe we had a lead against Brazil that we choked at the other day.
It was even crazier than that. The group stage didn't go well. I can't remember exactly how it went, but I know on the last day we were playing Egypt, and there were it was one of those things where there was only a minuscule situations where the U.S. could actually advance, but it all worked out somehow. We needed this exact score line to play out and for things to play out in other games. So somehow, some way we got through. And then after that, we take on Spain, the world number one, maybe the greatest national team ever, and a national team that just hadn't lost in a long time. And here's this U.S. team that just barely scraped out of the group stage. And they put together a performance that we still talk about today, and is still considered one of the greatest performances in U.S. men's national team history. And then they follow that up against Brazil, where they really took it to Brazil, and Brazil had to form a late comeback in order to keep it together. And I mean, after watching that, if you were an American soccer fan, you had to be really excited about what you were potentially seeing in 2010. And I think that World Cup met some of those expectations, at least when it comes to thinking back and some of the fond memories that we have of it. I mean, the Landon Donovan goal against Algeria is maybe the greatest moment in U.S. men's national team history. Certainly for
it's iconic.
My age, yeah, for sure. So yeah, if you got into it at that time, it was a great time for sure.
Yeah, 100%, man. And I still remember sitting down with my dad on the couch and watching that Spain game. And honestly, man, I remember thinking, if we don't lose by, that's literally how I think most U.S. fans are thinking. If we don't lose by more than 2 against the number 1 team in the world, I'm okay. I think we showed what we can do. The 2-0 threw me for a loop. The Josie Altidore goal threw me for a loop that I wasn't ready for. I think that watching him beat Casillas to this day still doesn't even sound like right or possible as it rolls off of my tongue, right? It's wow, he actually did that. And I think it maybe brought, that moment was so iconic, it probably brought a number of fans into this game. I'm sure you were already following pretty heavily at that point, but so many of us who weren't maybe on the internet were at least paying attention, because it was all over SportsCenter, it was all over sports media in general. I think it was the first time I remember, in a very avid way, where legacy sports media was giving soccer, I think, the attention it rightfully deserves. How do you think we've progressed since then? You mentioned the Landon Donovan goal against Algeria in the very last moments of stoppage time to send us through to the knockout rounds. And then we kind of fast forward to 2014, which I still consider to be a successful World Cup, even though, we bow out to Belgium in the way that we did. I say the way that we did because it was 16 saves that Tim Howard had to make?
Yeah.
I can't remember exactly how many, but it was ridiculous. How do you think American soccer, from the U.S. men's national team's perspective, has kind of, progressed and developed? And how has that really changed your fandom for that team?
I think it's leaps and bounds, man. I think whenever you think about development for U.S. men's national team players, there's a few different, I guess, eras of how it all came together. If you think about like the 1994 team and the 1990 team, and maybe even up to like 98 and 2002, a lot of those players came from the college system, or just kind of various different spaces. It was kind of all thrown together that way, and that was the U.S. soccer development style. Once we get to the era with the Landon Donovans and the Michael Bradleys and the Josie Altidores and those guys, U.S. soccer changed their approach. They adopted a centralized development system with the Bradenton Academy, where those guys they were identified at a very young age. The top soccer prospects from around the country were all brought together to Florida to train and develop. And we developed some really good players from that academy. Some of our best players ever came straight from Bradenton. However, in around the mid 2000s, that system was kind of scrapped for what we sort of more or less what we have right now, which was at that time the U.S. Soccer Development Academy. And that was less centralized and more spread out, but it allowed a lot more players opportunity to get higher level coaching, and a lot more players an opportunity to find pathways to professional soccer. And if you look at our current national team, the ones who were developed in America, at least, I mean, virtually all of them have their roots traced back to U.S. soccer development academies. Even Christian Pulisic and Gio Reyna, and guys that went to Europe early, Josh Sargent, Haji Wright, like all these guys developed in these U.S. soccer development academies. So I think you see the change in the caliber and type of player, and the education of that player, and where they're at in their development process whenever they hit like 17, 18 years old, versus what we saw back then with that other system. We're just developing a lot better all-around player. Now, the Development Academy is no more. It has rolled into MLS Next, which is kind of a controversial thing. There's, depending on what you read and whose perspective it's coming from, it's been a good thing or a bad thing. I don't know. It's kind of yet to be seen. We kind of got to wait to see what happens with that development. And from what I understand, COVID messed up player development in a big way for a lot of players. So that's going to affect things moving forward. But I think whenever you do watch MLS Next games, tournament games, whenever you watch the U.S. youth teams play, the quality of soccer they're playing is unbelievable compared to, 10 years ago, whenever I was watching the youth teams. Even though some of those youth teams 10 years ago had some phenomenal players that went on to have phenomenal careers, just the overall technical ability across the board for the players, and the tactical awareness and the tactical ability. I mean, you're seeing these players interchange in positions and just flow in and out, a brand of total football that you just didn't see from U.S. men's national team, U.S. youth national teams a decade ago, where we were just out athleting everybody. It's really exciting to see now. Whether that means U.S. is going to eventually become one of the, top 8, top 10 national teams in the world, and be able to develop players that are consistently among the best in the world, I think that's sort of the next step. But I think you have to be really excited about the changes in development and what we're seeing already, and with the understanding that this is sort of the tip of the iceberg, because there are so many new MLS teams that have come into the league over the last even 5 years, 5-6 years. You think about
seriously.
academies like Charlotte and Austin and maybe even Atlanta United and certainly like St. Louis. And these are areas where those academies didn't exist, or at least didn't exist to this extent a decade ago. So there's 12-year-olds, 14-year-olds, 10-year-olds who are getting access to that high level soccer instruction. And it feels like we're just continuing to expand that web of opportunity for young soccer players across the country. It feels like we're going to get more players coming from more places in the future. At least that's what it looks like right now. So it's really exciting. But once again, development just takes time. So it might be a decade before we even see the fruits of that come about. But it feels like we're heading in the right direction.
I think so too. I really do. I think, and kind of, it's weird to look at the development academy, how it scaled into, like you said, MLS Next. I graduated high school in '09. I was part of the SC Dallas original academy. I went to that tryout system. I remember in Texas, only 4 clubs were granted that level of access. And it was just, I remember, didn't even know how to really feel about it. We were just told it was kind of the next jump from what we were used to, which back then was called the Classic League or something. So, watching it scale and then get shut down during COVID,
Yeah.
I wasn't sure where the future of U.S. soccer was really going to come from, or how it was going to be kind of measured and scaled. And then you hear about MLS Next and everything they're looking to achieve there. I'm hopeful for it. I'm optimistic. I think you have to be if you want to see U.S. soccer grow at the same rate it's been growing. But it's interesting to follow as a storyline, right? Who knows? I think we'll really kind of see as it continues to grow. I want to touch on something personal from your side. You mentioned all of the growth U.S. soccer has seen. As all of this kind of happening in the early days, how did this scale to you wanting to? I could see, I could hear the fandom, right? You were following everything on the internet, the earliest days of all of this. How did that scale into? I see a gap in the market content wise. I want to start a channel, and I want to call it the Yank Report. Like how does all of that happen? And from a fan's perspective, just kind of piggyback on that. What were you doing before? I mean, were you a previous player? Were you following certain teams or clubs? Like, how did the fandom scale into you being a content creator?
I mean, there's a lot of things that happen. I think the first and most important thing, and I think it's a common thing with a lot of the people in our space right now, is COVID. We just had a lot of time on our hands at that point. I do video production and I have access to cameras, and I know all about this stuff. I know how to create good videos and kind of put together good narratives that flow well in video form. And I had a passion for soccer, and I love creating, and I didn't have an opportunity to create a whole lot during COVID. So I think it just kind of flowed naturally towards creating a YouTube channel for that. And I think that story is similar for, like, I think Filippo's similar with Tactical Manager. And I think, I don't know about Pete, if he was around before that. I'm not sure. But I think a lot of the channels, maybe Jake as well with FIFA America, I think, or it's called Soccer. I think we all sort of, we're around that time. And I think the other thing that was happening is, coming out of the 2018 failure to qualify for the World Cup, there was a complete turnover of the national team from sort of what was the players that were competing in Cuba against Trinidad versus kind of what we saw in those first friendlies under Dave Saccharin. Whenever we really turned it over to the kids. And there were some really exciting players, and there was just a lot of excitement in the U.S. soccer community about what could be moving forward. And I think at that time, there just wasn't a lot of mainstream information being dispersed, not a lot of mainstream media. So if you wanted to talk about these things, you had to go to the internet to do it. And I think a lot of these YouTube channels, these fan-generated YouTube channels, really filled that gap and showed that there was a lot of attention for this subject, and it was being underappreciated in the market. And I think we've seen since then that a lot of the big media has created their own YouTube channels, and they're creating more and more content. And I think that they've kind of taken our models that we've kind of put together for this and kind of scaled them to the mainstream level, and you're seeing a lot more mainstream media put together weekly soccer podcasts and weekly soccer YouTube channels and stuff like that. Still a little bit different than the fan generated content. It's always, we're always going to be a little bit less polished and a little bit more apt to kind of just say things that aren't necessarily things that you might hear from mainstream media. But I do think that that's a big part of it, is that there was this gap in the market, and that we filled it, and now more and more people are coming into it.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. I'm a big proponent of fan generated content. I have this bold prediction that I think, moving forward, you mentioned how legacy media has kind of taken this play out of, these independent outlets playbook, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
And really started creating content that seems like it was independently produced, and generating content, meeting the audience where they live. Moving forward, how important is fan generated content going to be to the growth of U.S. soccer?
I think it's really important, man. I think not just for the growth of U.S. soccer, but I think for the growth of sports in general. And I think if you look at the media landscape right now, the classic legacy, I don't know, sports broadcaster or just legacy media person is kind of losing significance in our culture. And more, the people that are looked to as the experts are the fans, are more of that fan perspective. I think a great example of that would be like Barstool Sports. Barstool Sports, I mean, the name Barstool signifies that it's just a bunch of dudes at a bar sitting around talking about sports, and that's sort of the brand and the concept that they built their whole brand around. And you fast forward 10, 15 years, and Pardon My Take is the number one sports podcast in America. And these guys don't present themselves as experts. They're not former players. They're not former journalists or anything like that. They come at it from very much a fan perspective. And that's the type of content that people are consuming in a big way right now. It's a different way to look at sports. It's a little bit less formal and professional, but more the way that people talk about sports at work or with their friends or in their group texts or whatever else. So yeah, I do think it's important. I think it's important for fans to be able to air out the conspiracy theories and the hot takes and do things like recently with Falarin Balogun coming to Orlando to be around the U.S. men's national team camp, and like the photos that emerged that like connected the dots and showed like his Instagram picture in the background of the building, and then where that was in Orlando, and like showing that like all those things are things that you're not really going to typically see legacy media doing, although they did pick that up and run with it. But I think that's just the stuff that's part of fan content, and what do they call it, like regular people journalism or whatever else.
Like independent journalism. Yeah, it's really interesting, man.
Yeah, because it's so easy for anybody to have a Twitter account and just post a picture or something like that, and it'll get picked up and it'll get circulated. The important thing is the content. It's not so much the people creating it. It is the content. If your content's good enough, it's gonna make the rounds. It's gonna circulate. So yeah, I think fan generated content is going to continue to be important, especially for something niche like American soccer is, at least right now.
Yeah, 100%. And you mentioned something that I caught there was as long as the content's good. When you say good content, I think people in their minds go to one of two things. They go to authentic and entertaining, or informative, right? What would you say is more important? Is there a balance there that you have to kind of maintain? Like, what would you consider to be good content?
Oh man, I think the first thing you have to be is entertaining. I think that's the thing that people don't talk about as much, because it sounds, I don't know, cheap or something like that. Like whenever people talk about what it takes to have to grow an audience or something like that, they'll talk about especially in the U.S. soccer world, like you have to know the sport inside and out, and you have to know the players and all that stuff. And yeah, that's a prerequisite for sure. And then you get into like I don't know, entertaining versus informative and stuff like that. Entertainment is so damn important. people want to be entertained. You don't just want to watch like a spreadsheet or something like that. First and foremost, that's going to be the number one thing. So if you're looking to create your own channel or create a podcast or whatever else, that's the most important thing. You got to keep people's attention for past the first 30 seconds, regardless of how good or informative your content is. If you don't present it in a way that's interesting and entertaining and keeps people interested, they're going to check out. That's the reason why textbooks are not New York Times bestsellers. Right? They might be super informative, but they're just not very entertaining to pick up and read. So you got to figure out a way. At least my goal as someone who does skew more on the informative side rather than like, I don't know, the hot takey side. I try to be informative while also making it entertaining, which can be difficult. But yeah, if entertainment is the main thing first and foremost.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly, man. And I asked that question, right, because I think everyone brings content, especially in this very niche American soccer market, or I would say maybe North American soccer market, because you see it with creators across Canada, creators who are covering, say Liga MX or anything else. It's you kind of have one of two sides, right? You kind of have those who are very informative, very knowledgeable, probably have sources close to players or teams, whatever the case may be, and that's a lot of the reason the audience tunes in, because that's going to be their the destination for information versus banter, right? Versus, hey, let's have a debate about this one player. You mentioned Flo Balogun, right? Where Balogun's going to land, why he would choose the U.S. men's national team over England, the conspiracy theories that are attached to that. And of course, maybe someone says something outlandish and they stick to their guns and they're not going to, kind of venture away from it. That could be the reason that someone's tuning in. I don't know. Your channel is very informative, right? I think if anyone wants to get, kind of clued in on where the U.S. men's national team is today, how they performed at Nations League, whatever the case might be, that's where you go, the Yank Report. Do you ever find yourself kind of wanting some of the other side of that coin, the banter, the debates? And is there, I don't know, are there channels that you flock to for that?
Personally, not really. That's just not really, that's not really who I am or like what I consume.
Sure.
And so I don't really flock to that as much. But I understand that a lot of people are interested in that. And I think that that's one of the sides of the American soccer audience that just hadn't been tapped into for a long time. And once people got exposed to that, it really blew up because it's just something that we absolutely needed within this market, because it just the people who were the legacy soccer media were a little bit too buttoned up, a little bit too professional, just not willing to kind of jump into those waters. So it's not me really. I mean, I might get into it a little bit, but yeah, I understand the need for it, and I think you've seen a lot of new fans come on board because of that.
Yeah, 100%, man. It's crazy how all it takes, right, is like one TikTok clip, right, of a TikTok video of someone, giving a crazy take, or they're debating someone on their pod, and it could be the most outlandish thing. It could be, I don't know how we would even compare something like this, right? Saying Josie Altidore can't lace up Brian McBride's cleats or something along those lines, right? It's just a wildly hot take. You can't even compare the two players, and that clip goes viral, and that becomes the means of how they bring a new audience to their show. I think you're getting that now more and more as we're much deeper into the social media era. But I almost wonder how fans were having these conversations back in the day when social media didn't exist. I mean, prior to you getting into Twitter and to Reddit and some of the the blogs and the forums that you've already mentioned, I kind of asked this before, and I wanted to see maybe kind of where you stood as a fan before U.S. men's national team. Who were you supporting?
I think I'm like a lot of American soccer fans, that I never really had a club that I supported.
Okay.
I watch soccer. I mean, I was a big FIFA player, so I would play FIFA, and I would watch the Champions League and watch the Premier League certainly, and watch whatever I could. I was kind of a fiend for soccer for a long time, and really enjoyed certain. I always enjoyed certain players. Like I always enjoyed watching Andrea Pirlo play. I really liked Thierry Henry. I would watch Ronaldinho as much as I could. I kind of hate watched the great Barcelona years under Pep Guardiola. Like you had to watch them because they were so incredible, but I kind of hated just how slow and prodding that they were, and just how
Yeah.
they just kind of were a meat grinder that ran over people. So I always pulled for like Jose Mourinho's teams, whether he was with Inter or whether he was with Chelsea or whatever else. Whenever he would go out and just talk smack to Pep, and he kind of served like the dark side to Barcelona.
Yeah.
So there was always different teams and different storylines that I would follow. I wouldn't say that I had like a specific team, like I was a Liverpool fan or an Arsenal fan or anything like that. I've tried, but soccer, at least at that point in time, was like a difficult sport to follow, especially before the internet was in the state that it is right now. Where like right now you can download apps to get notifications for whenever your favorite team is playing and always be ready to watch that. And if you have the correct app or whatever, the correct streaming platform, you can watch all the games. That wasn't always the case. So even if I wanted to watch like all the Arsenal games, it was hard to keep track of when those games were, where I could watch them, what if I had to go on like an illegal streaming site or something like that. So it was much more difficult to follow a team like that during, I guess, my formative soccer watching years. So I just ended up evolving into a person that just follows certain players, follows certain storylines, and now a lot of my soccer consumption is around watching the American players play, or watching, there's certain teams that have play styles or players that I enjoy watching, so I'll watch those.
Yeah, man, I love that. That's actually a great answer because most people that come on the show, their bridge into this game, right, was I played a lot of club soccer growing up, or FIFA is a big one for a lot of people. It doesn't get talked about enough. I think FIFA, it's coming to the end of an era, right? It's going to be called, I don't know what, EA Sports FC next season. We'll see how that all pans out. And the game itself, in my opinion, isn't quite what it once was, but it's a legacy, right? And so many fans have become bigger fans of the game because of it. But I love I love what you said there. Most people were in love with Pep's Barca, and they feel like it was Messi at his peak powers, right? But make no mistake, right? They owned all the possession. They would almost beat you down with it. They draw you out with their passing, and then they finish you. You're one of probably the first people I've ever met that just wasn't wildly in love with that brand of football and that brand of soccer.
I hated it, man. I loved seeing Chelsea beat Barcelona in the Champions League.
Oh
Whenever,
man,
like Torres got that breakaway goal. I mean, like I loved
yeah.
it. It was just like Jose played this just anti-soccer and beat him. Like I love that. And that was around the same time where I don't know if you're an NFL fan, but like Peyton Manning was playing with the Indianapolis Colts, and I always felt like it was so similar. Like Peyton would go up to the line of scrimmage, and the stadium would be silent, and he'd just be saying all these things and calling all these audibles and lining up the perfect play, and he would just throw like a 5-yard out pass and just keep going. And it was like, God, this isn't football. Come on. it frustrated me, and it frustrated me the same way that Barcelona frustrated me. So I liked any time that they went down.
Yeah, no, I'm sure there were a lot of Real Madrid fans more than anybody else. I'm sure, and you talk about Mourinho era. I mean, that era by itself, the Pep Mourinho rivalry, to this day, is still one of the craziest things I've ever witnessed. I don't know if we'll ever see that again. Like where I felt like two managers hated each other, and their teams were reflective of that. I'd never seen, and granted, we had 4 Clásicos in like 2 weeks that season, but I don't think I'd ever seen so much bad blood between two teams within 1 year, to the point where it had boiled way over the top by the end of it. Like it was just, I don't know. Do you think MLS can ever get to that stage where we're such a young league and it's hard to compare it to other leagues worldwide? Do you ever think MLS, and when we think about American soccer growth, do you think you get to a point where we have true rivalries the way that I'm not going to compare it to El Clasico, right? But the way that other leagues and clubs around the world have those rivalries.
I don't know. I think the best rivalries in the world, and the ones that, particularly in soccer, that rise to that level, are because they're rivals even off the field, regardless of what's going on in the field. They're rivals, and if you look at Barcelona and Real Madrid, I mean, I get mean comments every time I talk about this because I'm upsetting one side or the other. But there's real political drama between the Catalan region and Real Madrid, which represents the state of Spain. There's real geopolitical implications, and soccer has become completely entwined in that. And I think that might be the same as like River Plate and Boca Juniors, where Boca represents maybe the lower class end of the city, and River represents this wealthier the wealthier side of gosh, I forgot the name of the city, that city in Argentina. I don't know that MLS can quite reach that. And then you consider like Boca versus River, they're in the same city. You know, they're a few neighborhoods away, so it's like the fan versus fan is happening all the time. Same thing with like Manchester United versus Manchester City or something like that. AC Milan versus Inter Milan, and even like AC Milan versus Juventus. That's I think Turin and Milan are like less than 2 hours apart. Of a drive. You know, you think about Manchester United versus Liverpool is, I think it's like an hour train ride or something like that. I'm not super sure. A lot of these MLS rivalries, it's, you know, it's a few hours to get from, I don't know, Austin to Dallas is like a 2 hour drive. You know, it's a little bit different. And I don't know that you'll quite get that level of rivalry without like the geopolitical stuff going on. Maybe as we continue down the road, some of these rivalries will develop between the fans, and you know, we'll see some of that stuff emerge. I don't know. I don't know if there's really a cultural divide between LAFC fans and LA Galaxy fans, where like one side is, I don't know if there's like a political divide or some type of social or cultural divide that splits up those fans to where the rivalry exists outside of what's going on in the field. That's what it would take to get to that level. And I don't know that we'll quite have that in the United States. We really don't. In other sports, even like college football, which is probably the closest thing that we have to European soccer, we don't really have that. I mean, you know, you have Army Navy that kind of sets up in that fashion. You have Ohio State and Michigan, which a lot of that came from a territory dispute, I think, over Toledo that happened whenever the states were formed, something like that. So there's a little bit of that. Yeah. But some of these rivalries that are just built on performance, like, I don't know, LSU versus Alabama, they kind of go up and down just based on how good those teams are that year. So I don't know that we'll ever get that. And especially whenever you consider that MLS, at least at this point, is a single entity with a salary cap, which means that the quality of teams kind of transitions year to year. One of the things that makes El Clasico so special and the Super Clasico so special is that those clubs are always the best. They're always the best in their league. They always have the best players. El Clasico always tends to have some of the best players in the world. Whoever wins that game has true bragging rights worldwide. With MLS, there's going to be years where, you know, the Galaxy are down and LAFC's up, or LAFC's down and the Galaxy's up. It's going to be a lot more difficult to say that, you know, consistently this is a super important game. So I don't know. We'll see as it develops, but I don't think that we'll ever reach those levels of rivalry just because our country's not set up that way.
Yeah, and you're true. It's so right. Like you think about Europe, even just geographically versus you know, America, and how long it takes to get to any one given city, or for the fans to travel back and forth. I remember you know, a buddy of mine going to Spain, and him attending the Madrid derby, right? Atletico Madrid and Real Madrid, and he said it's crazy. There's these spots where they gather, the fans gather before the match and after the match, and they're basically within shouting distance of each other. And he told me that he was amazed that Like basically, he walked by the group of Real Madrid fans as he was kind of exiting shouting distance. He started to hear the chants of the Atletico Madrid fans kind of as he continued to walk down the street, and it blew his mind that there wasn't more, I don't know, heated exchanges or crazy things happening because they really weren't that far apart in proximity. But that, like you said, it can't really be a thing here just with how everything is laid out. So if it's not going to be rivalries, in your opinion, what next step does American soccer have to take to become? And I don't really want to. I don't think it's fair at this earliest stage of our league to compare it to other professional franchise leagues in this country. I think they've gotten decades ahead of us. But what does it take for culturally this to become more relevant than it is now? Right, to maybe even be a top 3, a top 2 sport. What would it take? Because when I think about the culturally relevant sports, I think about, you don't have to be an NFL fan to know who Patrick Mahomes is in this country, right? Mm-hmm. I say that a lot. Like, you could be an Uber driver who doesn't love, American football. You could be just working in an office, hear the name and know who they're talking about because that's cultural relevance. What would it really take for American soccer to get there?
Well, I'll say, first of all, I think it is fair to ask that question and to compare MLS versus the top leagues in the world, because Don Garber stated that he wants MLS to be one of the top leagues in the world. They've already stated that as a mission. So I do think it's fair. What it will take to get there, I think that there's different things happening. I think we always think about it in terms of MLS rising to that level, but I think we have to be aware that outside of the Premier League, a lot of the European leagues and leagues around the world are suffering, and we're on the decline pre-COVID, and then once COVID hit, have really struggled to get back. That the loss of that gate money during COVID has really set a lot of those leagues back. If you look at the charts of revenue and of transfer fees and of things like that, after COVID, it's just been the Premier League going up and everybody else going down. So that's one factor to think about, where MLS sits in the global soccer space. Is it's not just about MLS rising, which it is doing gradually, but it is about the rest of the world kind of coming down a little bit, which kind of changes the way that we think about the global soccer space. But as far as MLS becoming more relevant in the United States, I always say that the main thing, the number one thing is a frustrating thing, and that's time. I think the league is roughly 25 years old. A lot of the franchises are less than 5 years old right now. So you don't have legacy fans. Whenever I talk to a lot of Liga MX fans and ask them about why they got into whatever club that they're into, it's that, my grandfather supported this club. My father supported this club. This is the club that we'd watch whenever we'd have family dinners and family get-togethers. Whenever the baby's born, we put him in the Club America jersey or the Tigres jersey or whatever it is. You don't have that in MLS. The teams haven't been around long enough to establish that. So in order to really get there, it's going to take 60 years before you can actually, have generations of fans where one fan grew up watching it and now they're taking their kids to those games. You can't manufacture that. There's no like Drive to Survive series or some special marketing promo or Messi coming into the league that's going to take the place of that type of legacy passing fandom down. I think whenever we think about what clubs we support, maybe not just in soccer, but in other spaces, just a lot of it is the club that our family supported, the club that our dad supported, that, we grew up watching because our dad or our uncle or whoever else was into that club. MLS doesn't have that. It's not been around long enough to have that. So I think that is the number one thing that if MLS wants to get to that level, it has to do that. And there's just nothing we can do but sit around and wait for that to happen. And I think that growth is going to happen inevitably. But as far as like things you can do right now or think about right now, the biggest signs of success for MLS right now are viewership under, I think it's 18 years old. I think soccer is very popular for kids. It's like the number 2 sport behind football for kids under 18 years old. So it's just maintaining that market and allowing them to grow with the sport, grow with the teams. get to the point where they're bringing their kids, and once they get successful, they're or get jobs, full-time jobs, they're buying the season ticket passes and all that stuff. I think MLS is doing a lot of really smart things right now. I think one thing that they really don't have is the content. It's if you don't live in an MLS market, there's just not a lot of reasons to support one team over the other. I think this deal with Apple is something that they're probably going to build upon to create some of those series and those other avenues for fans to get into these teams and get into these players. If you're not a fan of MLS, it's difficult to really know who are on these teams, who are the best players, like who is Mukhtar or who is Zelarayan or some of these guys that are very good within MLS, but you might not necessarily know them if you're a general soccer fan. So it's growing those players' profiles and giving fans a reason to support these teams. You know, they're not Boca, they're not River, they don't have 100 years of culture and of history built up that you can point to. You know, if you're Charlotte FC, you've only been around for a couple of seasons. Like, how do you don't have a foundation, you don't have that type of culture. So it's difficult to tell stories whenever there's not a lot of story. There's just nothing there to talk about. That's sort of the challenge. But I think that there are signs that they're going in the right direction. But that's the challenge, and it's not just the challenge for MLS either. I mean, if you look at the other sports in the United States outside of, say, the NFL and the NBA, the NHL is struggling in the same way that MLS is to appeal to markets outside of their region. Major League Baseball the same way. I mean, if you read stories about Major League Baseball, they have this entire generation of new stars that don't have the universal appeal as the generation prior to them. Whenever I was growing up, I wasn't really a baseball fan, but I sure knew who Ken Griffey Jr. and Alex Rodriguez and Derek Jeter were, you know, Mark McGwire, Sammy Sosa. I knew who all these players were. Whenever you look at like the World Baseball Classic right now and look at the U.S.'s roster, I'm not a baseball fan. I'm just a general sports fan, but I don't recognize these names. Like, I know who Mike Trout is, but outside of that, I don't know. They're having trouble marketing to people outside of their space, just like MLS is. So it's not just an MLS issue. It's more of a global cultural sports issue as people have more opportunities for entertainment outside of sports. Keeping that money inside sports has been a sports issue across the board. Getting people to games whenever they now have so many different opportunities for entertainment. That's the challenge moving forward.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree, man. And you mentioned before, right there, with the comparisons you just made, MLS clubs don't have the foundation, right? They don't have, the legacies and generations of fans who come before them that can really kind of tell the stories that even if these clubs weren't telling them, on their own, if they weren't creating content, they weren't doing any of those things to keep up with the age of the internet, you still have, the word of mouth from generations behind you that can really build up that hype and that fandom in a way that, those stories really can't. And that's why I think the Apple deal for MLS is really interesting, right? They're being forced now to create content that tells those stories and builds a foundation. But I still think that the general feeling around the Apple TV deal is still kind of mixed. I don't know, and I know we're kind of winding down towards the end here, but just want to get your thoughts on this. Long term, do you see this Apple deal really benefiting the league, or is this just another, I don't know, revenue ploy from a bigger media entity coming in and seeing how soccer's growing at a pretty decent rate?
Well, I think whenever you talk about it's a mixed reaction. We have to say that there are a lot of American soccer fans out there that just don't like MLS and have always been very loud about their dislike of MLS and maybe dedicate Twitter accounts to attacking MLS at every turn. So I do find that, there's a lot of outrage on the internet, not just whenever it comes to soccer, but whenever it comes to all kinds of stuff where, something happens and somebody's like, I'm never using this product or watching this league or whatever else again, whenever they never use that product or watched it to begin with. So they're kind of just, speaking into the void in that respect.
Yeah.
Now there is some valid concerns for the Apple deal moving forward. The question about getting new fans into the league whenever it's behind a paywall or you have to go on Apple TV or whatever else to get there. It's for sure a concern, man. are fans going to be willing to tune into Apple TV? How are they going to get access to these games? This is a non-traditional avenue. How is that going to work? I think the rebuttal to that is that MLS has been available on network TV since the beginning, and the growth of fans has not been very good. It's not like having access to it has been doing MLS any favors for the past 25 years. So maybe it is worth it to pursue new avenues and try new things. I will say this. I think anybody who is a fan of the league and has purchased MLS Season Pass already and has gotten access to the content and seen the quality of the broadcast and just the love and TLC that Apple is giving MLS across just their wide range of media avenues has been really satisfied. It's really good. It is they're putting together a really good product, and the wraparound show has been good, and the post game shows and the pre-game shows and just the quality of the broadcast overall is really, really good. So I think that at least is a really great thing, that if someone does decide that they want to get into this sport or into this league and they turn that on, they're going to be greeted with a world-class broadcast, which is not something that you could say a few seasons ago whenever you tune into some MLS games and it was just like not in 1080p, or, you know, it was just low resolution, not great broadcast teams, not great camera angles, whatever else. That's a thing in the past. I think another interesting thing here is that by inking this deal, MLS basically got international broadcasting just in a snap. And whenever you consider the appetite for soccer around the world and also the appetite for gambling around the world, it makes you wonder what kind of dividends this is going to pay down the line. If you're, let's say, I don't know which countries exactly MLS is available in through Apple TV, but let's say you're in Colombia and MLS is getting a lot of Colombian players right now. That's a big influx. I mean, you have the opportunity to watch that player on your Apple TV anywhere around the world, which is not something that you can say about a lot of mid-tier leagues as far as like international broadcast rights. So I wonder if that's going to have long-term down the line impacts for just how the world views this league. So yeah, access is a question mark. We don't know exactly how that's going to play out, but the fans who have purchased MLS Season Pass already, I think, are pretty happy with it. And I think if you're going to get into bed with a large tech company or a large network or something like that, that's looking to innovate and try new things, I think Apple's a pretty solid company with a pretty solid track record of being able to predict what's next. I think we all know that MLS is not the end goal for Apple. I think that they're going to be trying to bring on bigger leagues and use MLS as their test ground to show these bigger leagues what could possibly be. I think that the streaming method and having a league on a platform like this I think it's a sign of things to come in the future, particularly for any non-NFL leagues. So I do think that there's a lot of merit to it. I think that it's going to be a good thing moving forward. I think it's a good thing right now. I think that $100 to be able to watch an entire league for an entire season and get all the content that you're getting is not a big investment, relatively speaking. Of course, there's other streaming platforms that are cheaper, but considering how much it costs to play a round of golf or something like that, I don't think $100 is a huge investment. And if you want this content, you can get it and it's readily available.
Yeah, 100%. And look, and I would say, someone who invests in like YouTube Premium monthly, right? Like it's when you think about the ROI on the investment, right? The content that I'm looking for. Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with you. I think it's a stepping stone, the right one. And I'm hoping that we just continue to level things up in a positive way moving forward. Before I let you go, Sam, I wanted to really quickly, I think your takes on American soccer are fantastic. I think what you've done with your channel up to this point, I think you're nearing the 15,000 subscriber mark. You're obviously growing at a really, really great rate from when you started this channel to where you are today. is there any piece of advice you would give to like maybe an aspiring content creator, someone who's maybe kind of just sitting back at home, hearing this, maybe they've been sitting on an idea for content for a little while now and just haven't pulled the trigger on it? What would you tell that person?
Yeah, we went over this before, but I would reiterate that entertainment is the first and foremost thing. Like, you have to be entertaining. I think fans of your channel will forgive a lot if you're entertaining, if you can keep them engrossed, and if you're making them laugh or whatever else. I think that's the most important thing. It's the thing that a lot of people don't necessarily talk about as the most important thing, because it just feels a little cheap. I don't know. I don't know what the reason is, but be entertaining first and foremost. And I think whenever you're starting your channel and you're coming out and you're putting out your first video, I think a lot of people have the just the reflex of being a little bit timid, just being a little bit in their shell. And look, man, if you go look at my first video, I mean, I certainly was, for sure. But I think just go all out. People aren't going to be watching your first video anyway, so just be as big as you can, you know, your personality plus a little bit, and understand that it's going to be a growing process, that being able to talk on camera and be entertaining and put together entertaining videos is a skill. It's not something people are born with, and that if you dedicate time to thinking about ways that you can improve, looking at other people that you admire and trying to figure out, isolate what are the things about them that I admire. Maybe it's not even, you know, U.S. soccer content creators. It could be content creators from other spheres. But thinking about what they do, thinking about how they put together their videos and their narratives or their podcasts, how they formulate that, and thinking about how you can do that in your own channel. Thinking about, you know, how you see the game differently than other people, and trying to deliver that in a compelling way. What do you do different? What does your content offer that's different than what's already on the market? And I think the main thing, probably the number one thing, I already said entertainment's the number one thing, but I think even more important maybe than that is that you have to love it. Like, you have to have a passion for it, because it's going to be a long time probably before anyone is watching your stuff. And it's, you know, it's a long time before you get monetized or anything like that, and you're seeing any type of returns. And even at my level where I am right now, it's not like you're making a ton of money. It's not like you're making enough money to quit your job or anything like that. It's not like the time that I'm putting into the channel is equally being reciprocated with the amount of money that I'm receiving. Like, I'm still a long way from being monetarily rewarded for this stuff. Like, you have to love it and you have to care about it in a deep way. If you're getting into it for any other reasons, if it's monetary, if it's just to look cool in front of your friends or whatever else, you're going to lose motivation pretty quick. And just, you have to keep putting out the videos. You have to keep getting better. You have to keep engaging with your audience. Keep kind of honing your skills, whether it's interview skills or on the mic skills, or skills of analyzing the game, or whatever else that you're doing. You have to keep doing these things on a regular basis to continue getting better. If you take a few weeks off, you're going to lose a bunch of your audience. So you have to have that passion. You have to have that love for it first and foremost.
I love that, man. And look, this is a great way to kind of wrap up the interview. I think that that's a massive points that anybody can really take home with them. If you are kind of sitting on a channel idea, this is coming from, you know, someone who's just very recently started their own channel. Yes, love what you do. Be passionate about it. Be entertaining. Be informative, and most importantly, be yourself. Right? Don't try to be someone else. Don't try to copy someone else's content. I think your true audience, your true community, will love you for you. So, Sam, this was fantastic, man. I really appreciate it. For those who haven't heard of the Yank Report yet or haven't tuned into Sam's channel, I will link that in the description notes down below. Give him a shout, give him a subscribe and a like on his latest video. If you're looking for Nations League coverage, plenty of it there to be had. Sam, my man, thank you so much for coming on the channel today. I really appreciate it. I'm excited to tell this story, and I'm sure we're going to have you back at some point relatively soon. For anybody who stuck around to the end of the video, I really appreciate it. Again, Box to Box presented by GOLZtv. My name is Jose Tejas. We'll see you guys next time.